Hello, everybody. Good morning, good afternoon. My name is Martin Boyd. I'm VP Product Marketing here at Prophecy. And with me here, the person you've come to is Patrick Terry, the Chief Data Officer of BOK Financial. So in a second, I'll hand over to him, but let me just introduce Patrick first. As I said, Chief Data Officer of BOK Financial. And one of the things that Patrick's going to talk about when he gets started here is some of his experience with master data management across various projects that he's run through his career. This is not his first rodeo or his first MDM project, so to speak, which is one of the things that makes him very valuable and interesting to listen to. Patrick got his MBA from Christian Brothers University in Finance and is in the final phase of completing his doctorate in strategic leadership at Liberty University, and is focusing on the role of the Chief Data Officer, which is, again, all kinds of interesting things. So this presentation that Patrick is about to do here is based on a presentation he gave recently at the Gartner Data and AI Summit. And so we got a great reception there, so we thought it would be really worthwhile redoing it for a much broader audience for the people who weren't obviously at that conference. So the presentation is probably going to take about 30 minutes or so we have plenty of time for questions. Anyone who has any questions at all, please drop them in the Q&A box. You probably have access to both chat and Q&A, but if you focus on Q&A, that just makes it easier to keep track of the questions and make sure that we answer them as best we can. So with that, let me share my screen and we can get started. Okay. Almost there. I think it's almost there. It's thinking hard. There we go. MDM and the Chief Data Officer, the twin superpowers of business transformation. I'm going to let Patrick obviously speak to this, but the whole focus here, as you would have seen when you were signing up, is how to balance the leadership role of the Chief Data Officer with the technology of MDM. And Patrick will kind of take us through his journey and his thought process around how those two things should balance and why they support each other, why they're better together, and why one without the other probably won't get you very far. So with that, Patrick, please take it away.
Yeah, thank you, Martin. And I look forward to presenting to everyone. Wish I could see all the faces that are on. That would always be better. I enjoyed the opportunity to give this presentation at the Gartner conference. And as Martin said, it was pretty well received. He and I put this together. And really the idea here is to just really kind of share a little bit of my own personal journey and experience with master data management and the sort of evolution of the CDO or head of data or equivalent type of role, and how these are related and connected to each other to help us meet organizational goals. So I'll start with a little bit on my MDM journey, just to kind of set a little bit of context because I can, help connect some dots. And I'm really even more excited about this presentation because there were a lot of people that wanted to ask questions the last time, and with the Gartner flow, it was just too difficult. But we have a good window of time, and I very much look forward to getting through the presentation actually and jump into questions that you guys might have. So with that, I have been in data and analytics for almost 30 years, started in brokerage, but in the last 25 plus years, it's been in 4 different banks. And I've done some type of master data management or customer master data journey with MDM 4 times now. And I'm currently doing it with my current, but just kind of walking a little bit through history, just for context. I started at Wells Fargo. We were doing master data management in the late 90s before they were calling it master data management. It was called customer-centric architecture, and they were deduping 50 million customers across all their platforms and what we would understand as MDM today. So been in this space for a long time. Moved to First Horizon, my local bank, where I'm born and raised in Memphis, not there anymore, but spent most of my life there. Spent a few years, and we had a custom implementation at First Horizon. Actually, Wells and First Horizon both are custom builds where the choice was made to develop and maintain master data management concept and methodology and tooling, all custom. So First Horizon led me to Heartland Financial, which is a much, I would say, smaller bank of the two there so far, and implemented MDM from concept to implementation with a vendor solution. And then now I am blessed to be the Chief Data Officer for BOK Financial. And they had made a decision to implement master data management just before I joined. And with my experience, they held the project for me to come on board and help launch. And so really what's interesting about this, not so much my history, but just to set context for questions later around the difference between using master data management vendors and building your own, and some of the plus and minus, and really much of that comes from like what's different about them and what's common about them. But what is really different is each of these banks, from a $2 trillion bank to a $17 billion bank, and in between, the size of the organization, the culture, the platforms, the structures, it's less about just technology, but it's the whole gamut from people, process, technology, leadership. All of that combined will generally dictate what's different, and but what's common, and we'll spend some good bit of time talking about that. That data is siloed. I bet if I polled, almost 100% of the respondents would say that data is siloed in their organizations. Even if they have large scale data warehouses, it's probably still siloed. Siloed data is just very normal in our space, and trying to wrangle that. There's a constant need for organizational change, and really, especially in banks and financial services, we sell to a customer, but we do that by opening an account. So most systems and methodologies and really implementations are bottom up, meaning they're account driven versus top driven. So how do you give a total view of customer when you have multiple systems that you can originate, from doing deposits to mortgages to auto loans, and 3 or 4 different systems, or large commercial relationships where you have other more sophisticated loan platforms? How do you understand your customer, for example, across all of those when everybody has an account? And so that bottom up mentality is really the challenge that the organizations face when they want to be customer driven or data driven, or both. And that's very difficult when you bottom up. So how do we do that? Or what is the goal of digital transformation? And so, kind of moving on a little bit, Martin, to the next slide. Sorry, what is the goal of digital transformation? It's, we need to deliver for our customers, and whether that's internal or external, often both. And with any digital transformation, it requires a lot of things, obviously, and it's going to start with good leadership. And so, in my case, I get to be a chief data officer, a part of the C-suite of BOK Financial, and that gives me a sort of seat at the table, which is more better. Is that good English? It's a better opportunity to. It's just a much better vantage point to be able to contribute and influence. The more senior you can sit within the organization or this role. It's less about me, but more about the organization, recognizing the need for that leadership in the right spot in the organization, and then having that good leadership, and then having a really good master data management methodology and concept. And I'm not calling it a tool yet, because it's much more than that. Because really what it comes down to is the whole twin superpower concept is I can't do much as a leader without having really good technology and having the other things, the people, the process, and the technology all together. That is really what it takes. So MDM by itself is a problem looking for a solution, and a leader with a bunch of great ideas and no ability to deliver on it. This is where this digital transformation can happen. And so, as we progress through here a little bit more, it's the idea of people, process, and technology coming together, and it's really that symbiotic relationship that makes it work. So let's dig in a little bit on the CDO side of things, or the leadership side. What is my job, right? It's really to translate the needs of the business, and that happens at every level. Business analysts do that at a very practical level. Leaders do this. Middle managers, senior managers. For me, I tie my objectives to corporate goals. My fellow executives, they need to do business. They need to make deposit. They need to generate deposit and growth, and we need to do loans. And it's pretty basic. But at their level, obviously, it gets very complicated to compete and have that competitive advantage. So as a CDO, my job is to drive business insights, to create efficiency, try to do it as efficiently as possible. So how do I do that? I have to develop data strategy. I have to support the organization by getting buy-in, and we can talk about some techniques and tactics on how to do that from a data leader perspective. And we have to bring the right tools and technology, people, process, all connected to that. And with that, that's how we really work to bring my vision from a data leader to bringing in the right tooling, like a great tool like Prophecy to bring in and help master those things those data things that we're trying to do. And so that all comes together. So on the data side of that, what do we need? We talked about data being siloed, whether you're dealing with CRM systems or legacy apps. And in my world, those are deposit systems, loan systems, sophisticated commercial loan systems, mortgage, all these different systems. Every one of those work fine by themselves. But when 1 + 1 is needed somewhere else, we need 1 + 1 to be more than 2. We need 1 + 1 to be 3 or 4. And what do we need from that is we need those business insights. We need to be more efficient with how we ask questions and make decisions. And to do that, we have to have complete, consistent, accurate data. And so how do we do that, right? So how do we go from siloed to something useful? Prophecy is a great engine. It's a great tool, and it's more than just a tool. It's a methodology and tooling and technology to implement to provide things such as match merge, to validate, to remediate. A lot of people think that that a good MDM solution is about deduping and we'll just use customer as an example because that's generally one of the first ones that people launch with. But it's also your exception handling. It's your workflow. It's what do you do when they don't match, or how do you answer questions? How do you follow up? How do you, when you have exceptions that need to be managed, how do you handle that? And that's where a lot of custom builds fail, right? People will build algorithms and do things to match merge and do that first step, but it's that validate, which comes with data quality in a lot of areas there, and then remediation of exceptions. This is where the true power of MDM that I would say often is a bit of an oversight, because people sort of jump from the bottom up and they say, okay, well, we need to figure out a better mousetrap to match merge our customers. But what about the validation or remediation, and then synchronizing across systems? So this is, from a master data management perspective. And again, I can't emphasize more that to really bring efficiency and scale, you have to realize that it's more than just a tool. It's how well you implement the tool in your culture, in your environment, and leverage all of the capabilities of that tool and those things working together. So let's talk a little bit about BOK Financial and what are we doing with Prophecy. The business goal, as I mentioned earlier, I am tied to the corporate strategic goals. And on our strategic goals, my commitment to the CEO is to generate X amount of dollars in revenue for my organization. It's very specific. I have a specific revenue goal that in my organization, I am to support the data to generate revenue with my quant teams. And that's pretty specific. I have other goals as well. But that's probably the largest one that I pay the closest attention to. But it's generating revenue from data, not just sales, but how I can do cross sales, how we can take information or data, turn it into information that turns it into leads that our relationship managers work the right leads, and we can make money and track it. And being proactive in that process, developing these customer insights that are critical to making better decisions. And then I have actually 5 categories of responsibility in terms of how I demonstrate value in revenue generation. It's just one. And 2 of the others are around managing risk and And then creating operational efficiency are two others in the categories that I manage. And so what is the role of prophecy in this for us? We have multiple systems that need to come together, and we need a unified view and version of truth. And I won't always say single source of truth, because if you're paying attention around you, that's probably a myth to think that we could ever get to a single source of truth, but certainly a unified, trusted, certified version of the truth that you release to your customers. That is our responsibility. And in my view, as a CDO, more practical, and MDM methodology and the right tools can help us get there. And so it's a unified view of truth, not a single source of truth. And I welcome questions on that later, if that is sparking some aha moments or questions. And then we need better data. And so having the opportunity to source data from multiple places, it gives us an opportunity to improve data quality and governance and control and certification of those domains that we choose to focus on. And the first one for us is customer. And why customer? It's the one that generates the most direct value to our organization. So it's the one we tackle first. And we have others, and I'll save some of those other ones for questions that you guys might have later. But yeah, so for us, we will be implementing customer domain. We are implementing customer domain right now, with production dates coming up soon, and we're in testing with our prophecy relationship. In the short time that I've been here, we've gone from concept to full testing at this point, and we'll be rolling out our customer MDM solution with a pilot with Purview, because we have Azure tools and Purview and a cloud presence. We have Purview, and because of the great connections between and connectors and relationship that Prophecy has with Microsoft, we will be piloting Purview, and then we will actually master other domains very quickly. Because to me, the true power of MDM comes when you do more than one domain, and when you start seeing how multiple domains relate to each other, and how the type of searching and scaling you can do, the exponential value really begins to go up. So some practical advice that I can give to the group, so don't be a problem looking for, don't be a solution looking for a problem. Often as technologists, we have a great tool, and then we go out and try to sell a solution. And here's the problem. Instead, we should really lean in, and this is where the superpower to me part comes between a good data leader pushing back and saying, what is the business problem we want to solve, and then seeking a solution to solve that problem and doing it in the right order. We need to partner with the business. We shouldn't be saying MDM to executives. They don't care. They don't know. They don't really want to know. They just want to be able to do business better. There might be somebody that you have to explain it to, but that's not your broad message to sell MDM to executives. You have to develop trust with them that you're going to bring the right expertise. I doubt too many people challenge the CFO on what accounting rule he's following when he's doing his job as a CFO, right? So we, as data leaders, we need to be trusted in the same way that our organization trusts our CFO. If he's saying this is the way accounting works, the way we need to do it from a best practice perspective, that's the expectation of us as data leaders. And we can't be speaking tech any more than a finance guy can start speaking accounting to me and think that I'm going to fully understand that. So we have to really partner with our businesses and bring the right type of solutions that are actually solving the business challenge. Next, very practical, be focused, right? Solve one problem at a time. Pick a single domain. A lot of times people start these journeys and they have this huge ambition and they try to do too much at once. And I won't use all the cliches of boil the ocean and all of that, but at the end of the day, start with one problem. For us, there was a long list of things that we want to do. We want to do organization. We want to do GL. We want to do reference data. We want to do, everybody's all excited about all the things we could do. I said, let's start with one. And we started with customer. We learned about the tool. We learned how to do workflow with the tool. We learned what processes need to change within our teams, because implementing the software is pretty easy. I can control most of that, but I can't always control the business lines who have to remediate bad data that's causing poor matching or deduping certain relationships that shouldn't be because of the data that's been provided. But remediation is a big part, and so you need to work your solution end to end. That includes who's involved, the processes that need to change, how are you going to support it, tackle that as one domain end to end before you tackle something else. I'm not a PLC guy. I'm a pilot guy. If I'm providing business value, I'm not a research department. I'm a delivery guy. You give me a problem, I'll develop a solution, and I want that solution to stick around for a few years. So starting small, I could call my relationship with Prophecy a pilot, or I could call it a 20-year journey. But either way, it's not a proof of concept. I'm going to do my due diligence up front, and I don't need to do a PLC. I'm going to deliver something that will stick around for as long as it makes sense, and plan to evolve it and continue it. If for some reason a particular direction, just not saying Prophecy or any particular one, but if you get into something and it's not working the way that you hoped, I will keep it until it's expired its useful life, right? And so I don't believe in PLCs. That's just a Patrick thing. Deliver value quickly. Don't wait too long to, you can't have a year-long project and not deliver something, right? So don't ask for too much up front without what you're going to deliver along the way. And don't stop with one domain. And I've kind of already given that one away, but solving one domain is a lot of work. But once you understand how to remediate things, once you understand how to use a tool, once you have people behaving different in the organization, it's a lot easier to do the next domain and then one after that, because you've done all the hard work. Now you understand what you're doing. And then, wow, the business is like, you're doing all of this, and these next 3 projects were a third of the cost or a fourth of the cost, because I already have the tools. I already have people. This 1,000-hour project with other people are now a couple hundred hours because they get it. They just need to understand what the new workflow is. Or I have a new department that is picking up remediation on reference data versus my back office for customer data, that sort of thing. So you really have the ability to scale. And really, so just to kind of, my wrap-up comment, master data management is table stakes. If you're not doing it, you're falling behind. I mean, that's just I can't emphasize that more. As a data leader, I can't just sell vision and strategy. I have to deliver. And that's where master data management, that's to me the other side of this. There's a lot of different things you can focus on, but getting your data right is critical to delivery for the organization. And MDM is, for me, and the 4 banks I've been in the last 20 years, is table stakes. And with that, Martin, I'm ready to start entertaining questions from the group.
Yeah, that was perfect, Patrick. Thank you so much. That was, again, very clear. And there's been quite a bit of engagement in the Q&A channel. So if you want to drop a few more questions in there, you please feel free. But there's a couple that I want to kind of compress into one question. And it's around the leadership with or without a chief data officer. How do you sell all of this, these ideas to management? Data governance, data quality, data management. How do you sell all of this construct to management? And another question that I'll just combine into it: has the perception of management of the need to manage data changed over time since you've been doing this for some time?
Yeah. So thank you. Thank you for the question, Ray. You don't need a CDO to sell it. You just need to not speak tech when you sell it, right? So I have a vantage point that, sits me next to guys that, I get to talk to every day. But at the end of the day, I was selling this long before I had any kind of C title or head of anything title. But success comes, to answer your question directly, in connecting how you're solving their problem and make that your deck, your slide. The slide that you're going to use to present to leadership needs to directly speak to how you're solving their problem without a bunch of acronyms or terms that they won't understand. And that's what you lead off with, and have them wanting to say, that's great, how are you doing that? And then that's the second conversation. You can sort of peel the layers, and as their appetite and their interest evolves in the conversation, you can go more technical in your conversation with whoever your audience is. But it starts with hooking them with, I have an example of a previous, I won't say which one, but we were delivering mail to customers that were no longer customers, to marketing, people that had left us, or people, when we did an acquisition, we had a very messy standard address database for something other than a statement. If you have an account, you have a statement, you have a statement account. But if we want to address you as a customer, like you have 5 accounts or 2 accounts, it was very messy. And so I talked about how I was going to solve that, that we're going to improve our customer mailing by 10% for X amount of dollars. Great, make it happen. And then, okay, enter a master data management solution. So what do? Think about that. We clean addresses, we master data better, and all of a sudden things get better. And so you sell it. Sorry, long-winded answer to your question, but you sell the business value and not the technical solution first.
And the other part of the question was, has the general perception by senior management of the need to manage data changed? I guess a lot of people talk about the idea of managed data as an asset, but how, and that's really the role of the chief data officer, but how much has the other executive management already absorbed that idea, or how much of it needs to be kind of reinforced or crystallized for them?
I think there's a pretty good recognition that data no longer sits in a system to be completely useful. GL systems, you can't, leaders are asking questions that can't be answered from data in one place. It's going to have to come from multiple places. Customer profitability is a great one. You cannot use your GL system to understand profitability unless you know all of the different accounts and how they're related to each other, to know who your customer is, to know what your overall customer profitability is. So in questions like that, they're learning that through a lot of noise, and it takes too long to get the answer. Leaders are starting to say, what's it going to take for me to answer these kinds of questions? What is it going to take for me to be able to understand that I have a mortgage customer that's not a checking account customer and cross-sell them? So leaders are getting it. Leaders are frustrated that we don't often move fast enough. And if we're not careful about what problems we're solving, we're spending a lot of money without directly answering the questions they're asking or solving the problem they're asking for. But they're definitely paying attention and making billions. I'm seeing this in my doctoral research. We're spending many billions on technology. And I have plenty of research from being just even in the academic space, where I've spent hundreds of hours researching every article on the planet just about, and around data and analytics, that there's as much failure as there is success in our ability to deliver value from data at the executive level. So.
Okay, great. Sticking with the idea of selling to management, you had talked about you like to just go to a POC and not, a pilot. Not do a pilot, but go straight to production. Can you talk a little bit more about that, and how do you sell management on that as being the right way to go? Yeah,
so unless the POC is very, very short, how do you sell value if you can't sell that it's going to be around, right? Now, if I was in a Wells Fargo, there's parts of a multi-trillion-dollar organization that can afford to do R&D, that they create X budget to try things. But most of us don't get that luxury, right? Most of us have to live in a space that says, I need to solve this problem. How are you going to solve it? And so the way you do a pilot versus a POC, it goes back to that recommendation: start small. Take a use case, a specific use case that is a big pain point, and fix it. And if you fix it, let it stick around for a couple of years. And then the investment in that has paid for itself. If that particular solution or use case is not scalable with whatever solution you have provided, then you sunset it. But it's not a POC, meaning if I'm going to ask for an investment, I'm going to give you value for at least this amount of time until this pays for itself. And to me, that is the difference between saying, okay, I need 500 grand to go see if I can solve your problem, or I'm going to try this solution. I believe that our industry, data and analytics capability industry, is too mature to be forced to try something before you can show value. And to me, that is the difference, that investments can be small enough, they can be targeted enough. You can purchase prophecy tight enough in a budget that most executives would absorb for a use case, for a domain, for a period of 3 years. And they'll make that investment, solve that problem, and then it's a pilot, not a POC. And if for whatever reason you can't scale it, then you sunset it. But that's not a POC, right? And so the hope is that you find success there, and then you build on it, or you shift from it, but you don't throw it away.
Yeah, it sounds like a lot of that, Patrick, is down to experience as well. If you have done it a few times before, you can say, you know what, this may or may not be perfect, but I know it will work at some level. So let's not be too tentative. Let's jump in with both feet and just make it work.
And let's bite off something we know we can swallow and
100%,
and get the value from it.
So next question, you just touched on it a second ago, but the idea of cost. Some of these things, certainly in the past, have been viewed as pretty expensive investments. So how do you deal with that? And is there a sweet spot of organizational size that allows it to justify?
Yeah. Asking price from a vendor is a starting point, right? Everybody starts somewhere with, you have a budget in mind, vendors have licensing in mind, and you start to work through it together. In my view, if you treat a vendor as a partner, they will work with you. And so I won't be specific so that I don't give away too many things too specific. But when one solution appears to be very, very expensive, sometimes that's just what the perception is for another organization, and that's what they negotiated. But if you take, we're talking about prophecy. If you think that the prophecy investment is more than what you think your executives are willing to pay, partner with prophecy and say, okay, how do you license? Okay, how does that work? What problem am I trying to solve? Leverage the partnership mindset, relationship mindset versus treating them as a vendor. And I feel you'll find greater success in them giving you a licensing solution that will give you the rails that you need to deliver on that use case, and allow them to scale with you, allow your licensing to scale with your use cases. And often, and I've never known them not to, right? It's just sometimes it's being willing to ask the questions and not treat them like a vendor, but treat them like a partner. They will work with you. And we have experienced that with prophecy, and I've experienced that in my experience as a data leader. That's how I'm able to pilot and not POC, because I treat my new relationships like a partnership and a real relationship, rather than this is a vendor that we're bringing in, right? And that's how I find success in doing that.
So appreciate you teaching people how to negotiate with us, Patrick. The other, which is obviously fine. The other observation I'd make, built into there's an assumption in the question that MDM and governance are very expensive. And I would say that is definitely something that is changing rapidly. There are some vendors and a lot of history in the space where these projects were very expensive. They would take a year or more to implement and get, and before you even go live, let alone start seeing value. And the licenses were very expensive. I think that has changed significantly now. If you look at some of the governance platforms, if you look at Purview from Microsoft, whether you whether that's really the solution you want or not. The price point for that is way different than other governance vendors in the space, and the cost for us for Prophecy MDM is way different than some of the legacy vendors. So I would just say, go validate your assumption that I don't think it's probably as expensive as you think.
No, and Martin, before you move on to put a bow on this topic, if you looked at something a year ago, look at it again if you haven't made a decision, because this space evolves in dog years. I mean, whatever you evaluated 2 years ago is useless. The capability will have changed. The licensing models will have evolved. Everyone is looking to provide more value, to sell their products, and to make them better, and to get in every market. I don't believe that there is a market that's too big or too small for any particular vendor. I mean, I work for larger banks now, but when I was at Heartland, what I was able to do at Heartland, which is a third of the size of the bank I'm in today, they thought the solution that I was proposing we would never be able to afford, and we were. I won't be specific, but it's all about them understanding your needs and where you're scaling to, and what it's going to take to get in that smaller market with that type of product. This was not even an MDM solution, so I'm not in the same space, but I still deliver. There's more than one discipline that we have to wrestle with, but sometimes, again, I'm sorry to belabor the point, but it's check back in. If you've done a proposal and it's time to refresh it, look at where the product has evolved to and how the licensing model may have changed, because vendors are listening. Vendor partners want to deliver their products to you, and so they're going to adapt and change as well.
Yeah, and just to put a bow on top of the bow, a year ago, about half of our customer implementations were on-prem. About 6 months ago, they started moving online. Now they're nearly all software as a service, SaaS, where we run the thing for you, and we switch you on just like you would do for Salesforce or something like that. So that's changed significantly, the amount of technical support you need. And also the licensing model has shifted from perpetual to subscription. So a lot of those things have changed. So Patrick, I see you reading the questions. Let me compress a couple of different questions into one from different areas here. Implementation, what in MDM we've called implementation styles. So operational versus analytic, and centralized versus others. So what styles have you found really have worked? What are you implementing? And just any commentary around that top-down centralized model and push out, and operational and analytic, how do you build your way into all of those different things?
Yeah, so...
And do you even think about them? Are they something that you even think about as a specific topic?
Yeah, I don't play checkers, I play chess. So you have to be thinking bigger than the problem you're solving. And so that, that, again, that's a little bit of the POC meets pilot meets scale, and how to evolve and how to manage risk and the assumptions that you make. It's most of the time it feels that it's more analytical at first. And I'm just getting, this is a Patrick question. I'm not speaking for the entire industry, but in the 4 banks that I've been in, it's when you think about customer MDM, it's probably analytical first, but as soon as they recognize the value, it needs to go operational. And what is the difference? What does that even mean? To be able to have an MDM solution that masters all your customer master data, just call it that, with a solution that's developed for analytics, it's going to be yesterday's data, right? So in order for you to be able to know who all my customers are and do reports and profitability and all the things, that's an analytical use case. If the chess game, as I like to call it, comes in, and you know that as soon as they recognize that value, isn't it valuable to do a lookup before create? If you have the ability to go to a solution to see if that customer exists somewhere in my network or in my organization, then now you've kind of shifted to potentially operational. And so you should be operational in mind, even if that's not how you lead out. If your business case is to look up before create, then you need to start out operational and then you can make that data available downstream for analytics. So it depends on what problem you're solving. But if you start analytical, you should be thinking about operational. And one more example is it functional operational if it's yesterday's data? So when you're considering your ingestion methodology into your MDM solution, you have to think a little bit down the road that if I'm going to do a daily batch process to get all of my data, which is the easy button, which is never easy, but it's the easier button to ingest daily. But if you know that like 2 days from now, relatively speaking, you're going to have to be operational, maybe you should engineer that ingestion with something like Kafka or an API type of ingestion and do it micro batch even. Not engineer your ETL for daily, but you could put a timestamp on it and engineer those small enough that you could do changes and not full loads and do micro batching. And I could refresh, which is what I did at Heartland, I micro batched. So I made it so that instead of taking a full file every day, we took changes every day, which means as soon as the dust settled, we were doing intraday updates and remastering multiple times a day. And now we're operational and I didn't change anything except run my batches more frequently. And I moved from analytics to operational capability, knowing that that's where we're headed. So I solved a business problem, but I looked ahead at what I felt was coming and engineered for that up front.
Perfect, thanks. There's a couple more questions outstanding in the chat, and if anyone has any more, please drop them in. But Patrick, you kind of teased a couple of questions in the as you're making the presentation. So let me loop back to those and hit those. So what are the next domains that you're going to tackle? You talked about customer being the one that you're on right now, but I know you have a few others in mind, and I'm just curious your thoughts on that.
Low-hanging fruit would be reference data, things that are, your domains of value type data, your reference data like codes. Sometimes those don't need to be mastered, right? But if you have major reference data that, like new products, if you offer a lot of new products, maybe your product codes is a reference data table. That may be something that you'd want to master next. Those are actually on our radar for next. A much larger domain is our organization domain, but that involves we need to be more mature before we tackle that one because it's internal and nobody really feels the value of it. But it's an operational efficiency that's a little bit harder to quantify. So I do customer first. We figure out Prophecy, the processes, all the things that we need to do it well. And then we will tackle a much more impactful one to the organization, though not tied to revenue, which is org. And for us, organization means all of our locations, our GLs, the employees are tied in. So who is the relationship manager for this customer and how do we pay incentives and bonus, all the things. So when org is it's the big one. And so we didn't make it first because it was not starting small. But that one will be tackled next year.
Excellent. And that just reminds me of something I was going to add to your previous question about operational analytic and the different implementation styles. When you get into different domains, I think I'm interested in your thoughts here, you nearly always end up with different implementation styles. The style of implementing reference data versus customer versus product versus other things will be different because of the nature of the use case, and they will, in my experience, most likely evolve over time. But it may start off analytic and then blend into others. So we nearly always find all of those questions end up being kind of hybrid. You need to be able to do all of them, and they will evolve as your maturity evolves, in my experience. So there was another question here that you teased, build versus buy. You've done a couple of big projects earlier in your career where you were building. Now you're buying. What are the trade-offs there? Do you ever get any pushback by other people in the organization saying, hey, can't we just build that ourselves?
The technicians will generally say we want to build this because we want control. But then that one guy leaves and then you're stuck, right? So, depending on what vertical or group you're talking to, you'll get different answers on that. Data leaders, we have to make recommendations and make good decisions. If you have a large engineering capability within your organization, maybe building is a good idea. You're in full control of your destiny. You don't pay license fees. You own your own destiny. You're not waiting on a release to have new capability. You are your own destiny. That's a benefit. The challenge is you're your own destiny. You can crush it for yourself by losing people and not having the right documentation, or not having active releases, or having people out in the industry knowing what to bring you next. So the trade-offs are big. I feel that the trend is resist the temptation to build yourself, and let partners like Prophecy, who are really good at what they do, bring what they do well, and then you do the other stuff. There's plenty of internal development around data engineering and moving data around with, API frameworks and Kafka frameworks. That's even becoming more standard. Focus your custom development in those areas that are always going to be custom in every implementation, and build your engineering teams there, and go buy things like Prophecy that are proven to work, and have the workflow, and have the future releases, and have the data quality engines, and have the things that you don't want to have to build yourself, and just configure it and let them do what they do, and evolve with them as the releases come out. And that's, I really feel that we're trending toward buy and configure for those reasons.
Yeah. It's in all things considered. I mean, as you said, it's a space that is evolving in dog years, but it is pretty mature. We've all had a lot of experience here, and why someone would want to build that themselves at this point is I wouldn't do it. Put it that way. One other thing that you teased was the question, or the concept that you brought up, of unified source of truth versus single source of truth. Can you talk a little bit more about what you meant there, and how that?
Yeah. So, I have like 3 hairs left on my head. I'm getting old. So, experience has shown that trying to consolidate everything into one place is a very stressful, and it's a journey you never really you never land on a single source of truth. Because as soon as you finally get a lot of things consolidated, have you unraveled all of the many connections to those systems? My current BOK scenario, long before my time, they spent years consolidating into one platform, but never untangled all of the hundreds of connections to the old system. And what you end up with is 10 years later, you have most of your new stuff in one place, and you got 1,100 users in the old place. You can never turn the old stuff off, and now you have to keep them in sync. And so there's so many. If we had the magic hyperspace button to go from this galaxy to the next one in a hypersecond, then it would be fine. We could do that. You could go to single source of truth. It's pretty easy to get all your data in one place. What is not easy is the 2 years that it took to get there. How do you deliver functionality in a new place, in an old place, and still in the old place? How do you untangle all of your legacy code? Those are the things that we don't generally think about up front. And you end up with all this tech debt. And so it's just a very difficult concept to bring in reality to be a single source. So instead, acknowledge that where you need to combine assets, you do. But there's plenty of capability like MDM to where you can unify data from where it is, and you can get the important pieces of that unified and certified and trusted, and then synchronized back out to those that need that data. That's your data is the golden record data, back out to those places where it sits. That is becoming an easier to become successful at mastering and unifying, and then because we're really good at data engineering, and so in moving data. So my theory and my experience says it would be easier for me to bring, instead of all of my systems addresses into one place, we unify them, get the best set of addresses, and then update them back where they are. And then I don't have to untangle the thousands of connections to all those source systems. That is a different path. And so you can unify, you can certify, you can golden record, you can do those things with this type of technology without having to consolidate all of those legacy systems to get there.
Excellent. And there was a question from earlier. What did you mean when you talked about the integration between Purview and Prophecy? And for people who may not know, Purview is Microsoft Purview, which is Microsoft's data governance platform. And we have an integration with it, so I can speak more around the details of all of that. But kind of at a general level, the relationship between governance and MDM, and your particular thoughts around Purview and Prophecy.
Many of us want to have better business glossary, lineage, governance tooling specifically. Many of us want that. It's very difficult to sell it by itself. It's like selling the electric battery in your electric car. It's the engine. Nobody wants to have to replace that engine, but they want the whole car. So it's just difficult to sell governance. I'm a data guy and I work in a bank, so you can bet that it's a big deal for me to understand where our data is, who's using it, glossary, but I still can't sell it by itself. And I've been in 4 banks and I've never sold it once. I can't. Wells Fargo's been doing it since the 80s. They figured that out a long time ago that you can't. So what we're talking about connecting is the metadata, the data about the data that you are managing. If I'm managing customer, what about the customer am I managing? What is the definition of customer? What addresses are standard? What are the relationships that we are managing? It's all of that data, the business roles, the lineage, the sources for that data. That's the data that would exist in like a Purview or any other tool that does that type of thing. Purview is what we're talking about. So for this project, we are getting into that tooling governance business by using what we're piping into Prophecy customer, and we are discovering everything about what we're doing to manage this project and feeding that into Purview as a way to introduce the benefit of this back to the business line, to say now you can look up information on customer that wasn't there before, and you're doing it through the governance tooling. So we can introduce the capabilities that we want from Purview without me ever really selling Purview. I'm selling discovery, lineage, glossary about the domain. So each domain we tackle, we are fully documenting that domain and making that information available in a tool like Purview, which that's what they do well. And so that's what I'm connecting.
Yeah, and just to add to that, that's a great answer on the general relationship, specifically Prophecy and Purview. We have a long-standing relationship with Prophecy has a long-standing relationship with Microsoft, and we've done a lot of work to integrate. We are, I would say, the best and deepest and most mature integration with Purview from an MDM solution, and we find they're very just like the twin superpowers of the Chief Data Officer and the MDM tooling. They're better together. They reinforce each other. With data governance and MDM, it's the same thing. Governance sets the rules of how you want to manage your data, and it can be master data as well as other data and catalog it and all that kind of good stuff, which has independent value. MDM then enforces those rules, and so that has independent value. But the two together allow each other to work, allow each product to work optimally and most efficiently. So. If you want to find out more about that, every other week I host a live webcast on that topic, and we show exactly how those things work. So if you can go to prophecy.com and register for a demo there if you'd like to. All right, so we're almost out of time, and I think I've been scrolling through the questions. I think we've answered them. Thank you very much for the engagement. There was a lot of really good questions in there. Final question, Patrick. So this is your 4th MDM implementation. How many more do you think you're going to implement before you retire?
Still have
How many more do you want to implement?
I'll do more domains here. Where God leads me is still. I go where I'm led. So I can't tell you how many more I'll be doing.
Excellent. All right. Well, as long as you're not fed up with it yet, then I'm sure there'll be more coming your direction, as you say, more domains, because that's where the real value is. So I'm not seeing any fresh questions. Again, thank you very much for your time. Thanks for the engagement and the great questions. And thank you very much, Patrick. That was an excellent presentation. I think a lot of insights for everybody, both on the practices of MDM and the leadership that it takes to make it all work. So
thanks, everyone.
We'll stop. And thank you all again. Thank you, Patrick.